Picture a judge, trusted by all, secretly pocketing bribes while innocent lives suffer. In ancient Persia, one man's betrayal sparked a punishment so horrific it became a legend. This is the story of Sisamnes, whose fate will make your skin crawl. Chapter 1. The Rise of Schisms in Ancient Persian. The vast, sun-scorched empire of Persia under the reign of King Cambyses II in the 6th century BCE. Justice was the backbone of order. The Persian Empire, sprawling across modern-day Iran, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, thrived on a system of laws enforced by trusted judges. Among them was Sisamnes, a man who climbed the ranks to become a royal judge, a position of immense power and respect. To be a judge in ancient Persia was no small feat. Who were the king's eyes and ears, tasked with upholding fairness in a world where disputes over land, trade, or family could spark chaos. Sisamnes wasn't born into this role. He earned it through cunning, eloquence, and a reputation for sharp judgment. Picture him in a bustling marketplace, robed in fine linen, settling quarrels between merchants with a commanding voice. His rulings were final, his word law. But with great power came temptation, and Sisamnes, like many before him, wasn't immune to greed. Let's set the scene. Persia's capital, Susa, hums with activity. Traders from distant lands haggle over spices, silk, and grain. Sisamnes sits in a shaded courtyard, a clay tablet in hand, listening to a case about a stolen shipment of goods. The accuser, a weathered merchant, pleads passionately, while the defendant, a sly noble, smirks with confidence. Sisamnes listens, his face unreadable, but something shifts. A heavy purse of silver, slipped to him in secret, clouds his judgment. He rules in favor of the noble, ignoring the merchant's evidence. Word spread. Sisamnes, the trusted judge, has taken a bribe. Whispers of corruption ripple through the city, reaching the ears of those who demand justice. This single act of betrayal sets the stage for a punishment so severe it would haunt history. Why does this matter? Sisamnes' story isn't just about one man's fall. It's a window into how ancient societies grappled with corruption. Justice wasn't just about fairness, it was about maintaining the king's authority. A corrupt judge didn't just harm victims, he challenged the empire itself. Sisamnes' actions would soon catch the attention of King Cambyses, a ruler known for his ruthless sense of justice. What happens when a king decides to make an example of a traitor? The answer lies in a punishment so brutal it would echo through centuries, even finding new life in medieval tales. Let's hold that thought and move forward to see how this unfolds in the next chapter. Chapter 2. The betrayal that shook the empire in the heart of ancient Persia. Trust in the justice system was sacred, but Sisamnes' corruption cracked that foundation. His role as a royal judge meant he held the power to shape lives, deciding who kept their land, who won their disputes, or who faced ruin. But when he accepted that fateful bribe, he didn't just betray a single merchant. He undermined the very order of the Persian Empire. Picture the scene in Susa. The marketplace buzzes with gossip as traders and citizens whisper about the judge who favored a wealthy noble over a hard-working merchant. The merchant, now destitute, pleads his case to anyone who will listen, but Sisamnes' ruling stands. The noble walks free, his smirk wider than ever. This wasn't a one-time mistake. Rumors suggest Sisamnes had been taking bribes for months, growing richer while justice suffered. Each corrupt verdict was like a stone tossed into a still pond, sending ripples of distrust through the city. Let's dive deeper. In ancient Persia, judges were more than arbiters. They were extensions of the king's will. King Cambyses II, a ruler with a fierce reputation, relied on men like Sisamnes to keep the empire stable. When word of the bribe reached the royal court, it wasn't just a scandal, it was a direct challenge to Cambyses' authority. Imagine a messenger, breathless from a long ride, kneeling before the king in his grand hall, lined with towering columns and intricate tapestries. He recounts the merchant's tale, how Sisamnes ignored evidence, how silver changed hands, how justice was sold. Cambyses' face darkens. To him, a corrupt judge wasn't just a bad apple. He was a threat to the empire's foundation. The king's response would need to be swift, decisive, and unforgettable. But what could punish a man whose betrayal cut so deep? Cambyses wasn't known for mercy, and his solution would be as brutal as it was symbolic. This moment matters because it shows how seriously ancient rulers took corruption. A judge's betrayal wasn't just personal. It risked unraveling the social order. Sisamnes' actions set him on a collision course with a king who valued loyalty above all. The stage was set for a punishment that would not only deal with but also send a message to every judge, merchant, and citizen in the empire. What would Cambyses do to restore trust and assert his power? The answer lies in a decision so shocking it would be whispered about for centuries. Let's move to the next chapter to uncover the king's chilling verdict. Chapter 3. The king's ruthless verdict. King Cambyses II sat on his throne, his eyes like burning coals as he listened to the merchant's tale of betrayal. In ancient Persia, a king's justice was absolute, and Cambyses was no ordinary ruler. He was a man whose temper could shake empires. The news of Sisamnes' corruption wasn't just a personal affront. It was a crack in the foundation of his rule. A judge who took bribes mocked the king's authority, and Cambyses needed to act decisively to restore order. Picture the royal court in Susa, a vast hall filled with advisors, guards, and nobles, all holding their breath as the king deliberated. The air is thick with tension, the weight of an impending decision pressing down. Cambyses wasn't one for half measures. His punishments were as legendary as his conquests. He needed a penalty that would not only destroy Sisamnes, but also etch a warning into the minds of every judge in the empire. Let's set the scene. Cambyses leans forward, his voice low but sharp, commanding his guards to summon Sisamnes. Disgraced judge is dragged before the throne, his fine robes now stained with sweat, his once confident demeanor crumbling. The evidence is undeniable. Witnesses confirm the bribes, and the merchant's ruined life stands as proof. Cambyses doesn't rant or rage. His calm is more terrifying. He declares a punishment so horrific it chills the room. Sisamnes will be flayed alive, his skin stripped from his body as a lesson to all. Gasps echo through the court. Flaying wasn't just execution. It was a deliberate, agonizing spectacle meant to horrify. Imagine the tool's sharp blades glinting in torchlight. The executioner's steady hands preparing for a gruesome task. This wasn't just about killing Sisamnes. It was about making his fate a symbol of what happens to those who betray justice. Why does this moment resonate? Cambyses' choice reflects a brutal truth about ancient rulership. Power demanded fear. As much as respect, flaying was rare, reserved for the worst offenders, because it sent a message no one could ignore. Sisamnes' punishment wasn't just personal. It was a public statement, a way to restore trust in a system shaken by corruption. The king's verdict would ripple beyond Susa, shaping how justice was perceived across the empire. But Cambyses wasn't done yet. His next move would take this punishment to an even darker level, ensuring Schism's legacy was forever tied to terror. Let's see what he did next in the following chapter. Chapter 4. The execution of Sisamnes city of Susa stood still as the day of Sisamnes' punishment arrived. King Cambyses II had ordered a spectacle that would sear itself into the collective memory of the Persian Empire. Flaying, the gruesome act of stripping a man's skin from his body while he still lived, was not just a death sentence. It was a theater of horror meant to deter any who dared to defy the king's justice. Imagine the central square of Susa packed with onlookers. Merchants, nobles, and commoners, their faces a mix of fear, curiosity, and dread. The air hums with nervous whispers as guards lead Sisamnes, bound and trembling, to a wooden platform. His once proud stature is gone, replaced by a man who knows his fate. The executioner, cloaked in dark robes, sharpens his curved blade, its edge catching the harsh midday sun. This was no ordinary punishment. It was a calculated act to restore faith in the empire's justice system. Picture the scene unfolding. Sisamnes is tied to a wooden frame, his wrists and ankles secured with rough hemp ropes. The crowd falls silent as Cambyses himself appears, standing tall on a raised dais, his presence commanding absolute attention. He speaks briefly, his voice carrying over the square. Let this be a lesson to all who betray justice. The executioner steps forward, and the first cut is made a slow, deliberate slice along Sisamnes' arm. The judge's scream pierces the air, raw and guttural, as the blade separates skin from flesh. The process is meticulous, designed to prolong suffering while keeping Sisamnes alive as long as possible. Blood pools on the platform, and the crowd recoils, some turning away, others unable to look away from the ghastly sight. The executioner works with precision, peeling back layers of skin like a butcher preparing a hide. Each moment is agony, each cut a message. Corruption will not be tolerated. This brutal display wasn't just about punishing Sisamnes, it was about power. In ancient Persia, public executions were performances meant to reinforce the king's authority and the consequences of defying it. Flaying was rare because its horror was unmatched, unlike a quick beheading. It lingered, forcing witnesses to confront the cost of betrayal. Cambyses watched, unyielding, as the execution concluded. Sisamnes' lifeless body left as a grim testament to justice. But the king's plan didn't end with death. He had one final, chilling act to ensure Sisamnes' punishment lived on. A decision that would transform this execution into a legend whispered across generations. What could be more shocking than flaying? The answer lies in the next chapter, where Cambyses takes his retribution to an unforgettable extreme. Chapter 5. The throne of human skin. King Cambyses II wasn't content with merely executing Sisamnes. He wanted the judge's punishment to resonate far beyond the blood-soaked platform in Susa Square. The flaying was horrific, but Cambyses had a vision that would elevate this act into a chilling symbol of justice. As the crowd dispersed, shaken by the gruesome spectacle, the king issued a command that stunned even his most loyal advisors. Sisamnes' flayed skin, carefully preserved by the executioner, was to be tanned and stretched over the judge's own courtroom chair. This macabre throne would serve as a permanent reminder of the cost of corruption. Imagine the scene: artisans, their hands trembling, work under torchlight to transform the skin into a grotesque covering, stitching it tightly over the wooden frame of the chair. The once grand seat of justice, where Sisamnes had issued his corrupt rulings, now bore the eerie mark of his betrayal. Let's step into the courtroom where this grim relic is unveiled. The air is heavy with the scent of leather and fear as officials and citizens gather, summoned by royal decree. The chair sits at the center of the room, its surface unnervingly smooth, the faint outline of human features still visible in the stretched hide. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Some say it's cursed, others that it's a masterpiece of royal vengeance. Cambyses enters, his gaze fixed on the chair, and announces his final twist. Sisamnes' son, Otanes, will take his father's place. As judge, forced to sit on this very throne to deliver justice. Picture Otanes, a young man with his father's sharp mind but none of his greed, staring at the chair in horror. Every ruling he makes will be under the literal weight of his father's. Fate, a daily reminder to uphold fairness or face a similar end. The crowd murmurs, awestruck by the king's audacity. Cambyses has turned a man's punishment into a living monument. This act was more than cruelty, it was psychological warfare. By placing Otanes in his father's chair, Cambyses ensured that every judge in the empire would think twice before accepting a bribe. The throne of human skin wasn't just a punishment for schism. It was a warning to all who held power, a visceral symbol that justice belonged to the king. In ancient Persia, where loyalty to the ruler was paramount, this bold move cemented Cambyses' reputation as a ruler who could wield fear as skillfully as a sword. But how would this gruesome legacy shape Otanes and the empire's future? Would it deter corruption or breed resentment? The next chapter will explore the impact of this haunting throne on those who faced it. Chapter 6: Otanes and the Shadow of the Throne. The courtroom in Susa, once a place of order and authority, now carried a sinister weight. Otanes, the son of the disgraced Sisamnes, stepped into his father's role as a royal judge, but he did so under the grim shadow of a throne draped in human skin. Every day, Otanes had to sit on that grotesque chair, its surface a constant reminder of his father's betrayal and brutal end. Imagine the young judge, barely past his youth, entering the courtroom for the first time. The crowd watches him closely, their eyes flickering between his face and the Macabre seat. Otanes' hands grip the armrests, his fingers brushing against the tanned hide that was once his father. The room is silent, save for the rustle of robes and the faint creak of the chair. Every case he hears, whether a dispute over stolen livestock or a merchant's plequeries, an unspoken pressure. Rule justly, or face a fate like Sisamnes. Picture a typical day in Otanes' new life. A farmer stands before him, accusing a neighbor of stealing water from his irrigation channel. The evidence is murky, the stakes high in a land where water is life. Otanes listens intently, his mind racing. He knows the crowd is judging him, not just for his ruling, but for his character. Will he follow his father's path, swayed by wealth or influence? Or will he prove himself incorruptible? The throne beneath him feels like a living thing, its history pressing into his spine. Otanes rules in favor of the farmer, citing clear evidence of tampering with the channel. The crowd nods, some with relief, others with skepticism. Each decision builds his reputation, but the throne ensures he never forgets the cost of failure. Whispers circulate that Otanes is different, fair, meticulous, almost obsessively. But the fear lingers that one misstep could bring the king's wrath. This chapter of the story reveals the human toll of Cambyses' justice. Otanes wasn't just a judge, he was a symbol, a man forced to carry his father's shame while striving to restore trust. In ancient Persia, where loyalty to the king was everything, Otanes' role showed how fear could shape behavior. His rulings, fair as they were, carried a deeper message. Justice in the empire was no longer a privilege but a burden, watched closely by a king who demanded perfection. The throne of skin didn't just haunt Otanes, it sent a ripple of caution through every judge in the empire. But how long could such a brutal lesson hold sway? Would Otanes' fairness rebuild faith in the system, or would the throne's grim legacy sow new seeds of unrest? Let's explore that in the next chapter. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Fear in Persia. Otanes' new role as a judge, seated on the grotesque throne of his father's flayed skin, sent shockwaves through the Persian Empire. King Cambyses II had crafted a punishment that wasn't just about Sisamnes. It was a calculated move to instill fear in every corner of his vast realm. From the bustling markets of Susa to the distant outposts in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the story of the throne spread like wildfire. Imagine a tavern in Babylon where traders from across the empire gather over cups of barley beer, their voices low as they recount the tale. A judge flayed alive, his skin turned into a seat for his own son. The story wasn't just gossip, it was a warning etched into the minds of every official, merchant, and citizen. Cambyses had ensured that no one in his empire would forget the price of corruption, and the throne became a symbol of his unrelenting justice. Let's step into the broader empire to see the impact. In a dusty courtroom in Persepolis, another judge hesitates before ruling on a land dispute, his eyes darting nervously as if Cambyses himself were watching. In Memphis, a tax collector double-checks his records, terrified of being accused of skimming profits. The throne's story reshapes behavior, making officials cautious, even paranoid. Picture a young scribe, barely trained, tasked with recording Otanes' rulings in Susa. He scribbles furiously on a clay tablet, noting how Otanes weighs every piece of evidence with painstaking care, as if his life depends on it. The scribe overhears whispers from the crowd. Otanes is fair, but that chair. The throne's presence looms over every decision, turning courtrooms into stages where loyalty to the king is performed. Some admire Cambyses' bold stroke, seeing it as a necessary purge of corruption. Others, though, murmur in private, questioning if such brutality breeds loyalty or resentment. The legacy of the throne wasn't just about fear, it was about control. Cambyses had turned a single act of betrayal into a tool to govern an empire. By making Otanes judge, he ensured the story lived on, a daily reminder of what happens to those who stray. But fear is a double-edged sword. In the markets, merchants began to distrust judges altogether, fearing they might rule harshly to prove their loyalty. In villages, stories of the throne grew darker, with some claiming schism spirit haunted the courtroom, cursing those who sat in his place. Cambyses had restored order, but at what cost? The empire was watching Otanes, waiting to see if his fairness could heal the wounds left by his father's betrayal, or if the throne's grim shadow would spark new tensions. The next chapter will dive into how this story crossed centuries, finding new life in the medieval world. Chapter 8. The tale crosses centuries. The story of Sisamnes and his gruesome throne didn't fade with the dust of ancient Persia. It found new life, carried across centuries like a dark heirloom, until it was woven into the tapestry of medieval European lore. By the time the Middle Ages swept across Europe, with its castles, knights, and fervent obsession with justice and morality, the tale of the corrupt judge and his skin-covered chair had transformed into a chilling parable. It was no longer just a Persian king's brutal lesson. It became a universal warning, retold by scholars, artists, and chroniclers who saw in Schism's fate a timeless reflection of human greed and divine retribution. Picture a dimly lit monastery in 15th century Flanders, where monks hunched over parchment, their quills scratching out the story in Latin. They didn't just recount the flaying, they embellished it, casting it as a moral tale to teach lords, judges, and common folk about the perils of corruption in a world where God's judgment loomed large. Let's transport ourselves to a medieval town square, where a traveling storyteller stands on a wooden crate, captivating a crowd of merchants, peasants, and wide-eyed children. His voice rises and falls as he describes King Cambyses, now a distant, almost mythical figure, ordering Schism's skin to be stretched over a throne. The crowd gasps as he mimics the executioner's blade, his hands slicing through the air. He paints Otanes as a tragic hero, forced to judge from a seat of horror, his every ruling a plea for redemption. The storyteller adds flourishes. Perhaps Schism's ghost whispered warnings to Otanes, or the throne creaked ominously during unjust rulings. These details weren't in Persian records, but they resonated with a medieval audience steeped in tales of divine justice and earthly punishment. The story wasn't just entertainment, it was a lesson, a reminder that power came with responsibility, and betrayal invited wrath. Whether from a king or from God, this transformation wasn't accidental. In the Middle Ages, justice was a public spectacle, much like in ancient Persia. Towns executed criminals in marketplaces, their bodies left on display to deter others. The story of schisms fit perfectly into this worldview, where punishment was both practical and symbolic. Imagine a medieval judge in a European city like Bruges, sitting in a grand hall adorned with tapestries. He's heard the tale of perhaps from a book like Herodotus' Histories, which chronicled the Persian judge's fate and was rediscovered by Renaissance scholars. The judge glances at his own wooden chair, plain but heavy with responsibility, and feels a chill. The story of the throne, now centuries old, shapes his rulings, urging him to avoid bribes lest he face a fate as grim as Schism's artists. 2. Seized the tale Flemish painter Gerard David in 1498 created a diptych showing the flaying, its vivid reds and stark shadows haunting viewers in Bruges town hall. The painting wasn't just art, it was a warning to officials, hung where justice was dispensed. The tale's journey from Persia to Europe shows how stories evolve to fit new cultures. In Persia, it was about royal power and loyalty to Cambyses. In medieval Europe, it became a moral fable, blending pagan history with Christian themes of sin and judgment. Monks and scholars saw parallels to biblical stories, like Ananias and Sapphira, struck dead for lying to God. The throne of skin became a metaphor for the weight of justice, a reminder that those who judged others sat under scrutiny themselves. But as the story spread, it raised questions. Did such a brutal lesson truly deter corruption, or did it glorify violence? And how did Otanes' legacy fare in this new telling? The next chapter will explore how his role as a just judge contrasted with his father's infamy, shaping the story's enduring message. Chapter 9. Otanes' Redemption and the Moral of Justice. As the tale of schisms crossed into medieval Europe, Otanes the son, forced to judge from his father's skin-covered throne, emerged as a figure of redemption in the story's evolving narrative. In the Persian Empire, Otanes had been a living symbol of Cambyses' ruthless justice, but in medieval retellings, he became a beacon of hope, man who rose above his father's shame to embody fairness. Picture a 15th century European courtroom, its walls adorned with frescoes of saints and sinners. A judge, inspired by tales of Otanes, read in a scholar's manuscript, reflects on his own rulings, striving to be as just as the young Persian. The story of Otanes wasn't just about sitting on a gruesome throne. It was about transforming a legacy of corruption into one of integrity, a narrative that resonated deeply in a medieval world obsessed with moral redemption and divine approval. Let's step into Otanes' world as imagined by medieval storytellers. In their version, Otanes is depicted as a solemn figure, his face etched with determination as he enters the Susa courtroom each day. The throne, still draped in his father's tanned skin, creaks under his weight, a constant reminder of betrayal, yet Otanes refuses to let it define him. Imagine him hearing a case. Two landowners, one a wealthy noble, the other a struggling farmer, dispute a strip of fertile land. The noble offers gold in secret, but Otanes, haunted by his father's fate, rejects it outright. He pores over boundary records, questions witnesses, and rules for the farmer, citing evidence of ancient land rights. The crowd murmurs approval, and word spreads. Otanes is not his father. His rulings are fair, his judgments clear, and his courtroom becomes a place where justice feels possible again. Storytellers embellish this, claiming Otanes' fairness brought prosperity to Susa, with markets thriving and disputes dwindling under his steady hand. This focus on Otanes mattered, because it gave the story a redemptive arc, crucial for medieval audiences. In a time when Christian teachings emphasized repentance and salvation, Otanes was recast as a man who overcame inherited sin. Monks writing chronicles likened him to biblical figures like Joseph, who rose from hardship to greatness. In a Flemish town hall, where Gerard David's painting of schisms flaying hung, officials pointed to Otanes' example, urging judges to emulate his integrity. The throne, once a symbol of horror, became a paradox, a seat of shame that inspired virtue. But the story also posed a question. Could one man's fairness undo the damage of such a brutal lesson? Some medieval listeners wondered if Cambyses' extreme punishment glorified violence over mercy, a tension that echoed in their own debates about justice. Otanes' legacy, though, endured as proof that even the darkest beginnings could lead to light. The final chapter will reveal how this tale's lessons linger in our understanding of justice today. Chapter 10. The enduring lesson of schism's fate. The story of schisms from its bloody origins in 6th century Persia to its haunting retellings in medieval Europe is more than a tale of punishment. It's a mirror held up to humanity's eternal struggle with justice, power, and morality. What began as King Cambyses II's brutal response to a corrupt judge evolved into a legend that shaped how societies, ancient and modern, grapple with the balance between retribution and redemption. As we close this journey, let's explore how the flaying of schisms and the rise of Otanes left an indelible mark on history, art, and even our modern understanding of fairness. This final chapter isn't just a look back, it's a chance to reflect on why this gruesome tale still resonates, challenging us to ask, does fear truly forge justice, or does it merely mask deeper flaws? Let's dive into the lasting impact of this story, its echoes in culture, and what it teaches us today. Picture the scene one last time in ancient Susa, where the throne of skins and skins stood as a grim monument. Otanes, the young judge, had turned his father's shame into a legacy of fairness, ruling with a precision that calmed the restless empire. But the throne's shadow never left him. Imagine him late at night, alone in the courtroom, staring at the chair under flickering torchlight. The tanned hide, stretched tight over wood, seems to whisper of his father's greed and Cambyses' wrath. Otanes' rulings, though just, were born under pressure. No judge should face a constant reminder that one misstep could bring a fate as horrific as his father's. In Persian records, like those of Herodotus, Otanes fades from view. His life after the throne a mystery. But his story didn't end there. It traveled, carried by traders along the Silk Road, by Greek historians penning tales of Persian kings, until it landed in the medieval world, where it found new purpose in medieval Europe. The tale of schisms was more than a historical anecdote, was a moral cornerstone. Imagine a 15th century town in Flanders, its cobblestone streets bustling with merchants and artisans. In the town hall, a massive painting by Gerard David looms over the courtroom. One panel shows Sisamnes bound and screaming as the executioner's blade peels his skin. The other shows Otanes solemn and resolute, seated on the grotesque throne. The painting, commissioned in 1498, wasn't just art, it was a public service announcement. Judges entering the hall felt its weight, their eyes drawn to the vivid reds of blood and the stark contrast of Otanes' dignity. The artwork, still preserved in Bruges, served as a daily reminder: betray justice, and your fate could be as grim. As Sisamnes, clerks, and magistrates, trained on Herodotus' histories, retold the story in letters and sermons, casting it as a cautionary tale for a world where corruption was as rampant as ever. In England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire, the tale was woven into legal teachings, urging officials to prioritize fairness over gold. But the story's impact went beyond courtrooms. In medieval churches, priests drew parallels to biblical lessons, comparing schism's punishment to the fate of sinners in hell. Imagine a sermon in a Gothic cathedral, the preacher's voice echoing off stone walls as he describes the throne of skin to a rapt congregation. He points to Otanes as a model of redemption, a man who turned from his father's sin to serve God's justice. The crowd, clutching rosaries, nods solemnly, internalizing the message. Corruption invites divine wrath, but righteousness can redeem. Manuscripts from the period, like those in monastic libraries, embellished the tale with vivid details. Some claimed the throne was cursed, causing unjust judges to tremble in its presence, while others said Otanes' fairness brought miracles, like bountiful harvests in Susa. These additions, though fanciful, show how the story was adapted to fit a Christian worldview, where every act carried eternal consequences. Now, let's fast forward to today. The story of schisms might seem like a relic, but its echoes are everywhere. Think about modern justice systems, where judges still face temptations, political pressure, or personal bias. The throne of skin may be gone, but the pressure to rule fairly under scrutiny remains. In courtrooms worldwide, from small-town hearings to international tribunals, the principle that justice must be impartial holds firm. The tale also lives in art and culture. Gerard David's painting still draws visitors in Bruges, its stark imagery a reminder of justice's cost. Modern storytellers, from filmmakers to novelists, draw on similar themes. Think of movies where corrupt officials face brutal consequences, or books that explore the weight of inherited guilt. The story's core question: does fear of punishment create justice, or does it breed resentment? Is as relevant treasure relevant today? Cambyses' brutal approach contrasts with modern ideals of rehabilitation, yet the threat of harsh penalties, like prison or public shaming, still shapes behavior. Otanes' redemption offers another lesson. Integrity can rise from ruin, a hope that resonates in a world where second chances are valued. The tale of Sisamnes challenges us to reflect on our own systems. Are harsh punishments effective, or do they perpetuate cycles of fear and rebellion? Otanes' fairness suggests a path forward justice rooted in principle, not dread. As we close, consider this. What would you do, seated on a throne of consequences, knowing every choice could define your legacy? If this story gripped you, hit that like button, subscribe for more tales from history, and drop a comment below. Would you rule like Otanes, or would the pressure break you? Let's keep the conversation going.